Smoke, thick, black, and bitter, it curled above the marble ruins like the last breath of a dying god. In 146 BC, the city of Corinth didn't just fall, it wept ash and silence. And if you had stood there, barefoot in the rubble, the columns cracked like broken spines, you might have asked, how did a people of sculptors and scholars lose everything to soldiers with rough hands and iron hearts? They weren't just crushed, they were absorbed, and that is far more dangerous. Imagine a Roman centurion stepping into a looted Greek library. Dust clings to his sandals. His eyes wander across shelves of parchment and thought. He doesn't understand the words, but he feels their weight. Was he afraid? Or did he sense that victory on the battlefield might cost him something far greater? Control of the mind? Greece was old, elegant, arrogant. Rome was young, brutal, hungry. But here's the paradox. The conqueror came to destroy and left transformed. Let's rewind, not to swords, but to souls. Because this wasn't just a conquest of cities. It was a conquest of identity. Aulus Postumius Albinus, Roman commander, patrician, a man of blood and book, once tried writing Greek history in Greek. The Greeks mocked his grammar. The Romans mocked his vanity. He tried to become what he destroyed and failed at both. Why would a rising empire feel the need to imitate what it had just crushed? Power alone wasn't enough. Rome wanted something deeper. It wanted permanence. And who better to steal it from than the Greeks? Those ancient architects of eternity. Corinth didn't fall in a day. No great fall ever does. It had been crumbling for decades under its own pride, fractured alliances, and the slow, poisonous diplomacy of Rome. But when the legions finally breached its walls, it wasn't war. It was ritual, a final performance. Swords weren't just swung, they were symbols. Each slash, the severing of legacy. Each flame, the erasure of memory. Yet even as statues melted and blood dried on the mosaic floors, something else rose, something invisible. Greeks, even in chains, began whispering into Roman ears. Philosophy, poetry, the architecture of the mind. Why would a militaristic republic fear an aging civilization of thinkers? Because thoughts, unlike spears, outlive their creators. It's easy to burn a library, harder to unlearn what it taught you. Let me ask you this. What happens when brute force absorbs refined brilliance and calls it victory? Did Rome conquer Greece? Or did Greece, in its final breath, inject itself into Rome's veins, like a dying philosopher whispering secrets to a warlord? That's the riddle. A riddle that begins not with a charge, but with a man named Pyrrhus, and a war that would teach Rome its most painful lesson yet. If you're enjoying this story of Rome and Greece, make sure to subscribe for the full series. A king steps off a ship in southern Italy. Elephants rumble behind him. Rome doesn't know it yet, but its greatest enemy isn't the army he brings. It's the lesson he leaves behind. The sea was calm when Pyrrhus landed, but beneath the surface, the tides of history churned, silent, invisible, inevitable. He stepped onto Italian soil like a myth walking out of time. Crowned in gold, wrapped in Macedonian silk, eyes fixed not just on victory, but on legacy. You could almost hear the whispers. Alexander reborn. Greece risen again. But legends are heavy, and this one would crush him. Who was Pyrrhus? A cousin to Alexander the Great. A warrior king of Epirus. Restless. Brilliant. Doomed. At 37, he sailed west. Not for gold, not for glory, but for obligation. The Greek city of Tarentum had begged him for help against the rising Roman tide. And he came, not to save them, but to test himself. Now, imagine the Romans watching from their hill camps. Hardened veterans in battered leather, unfamiliar with war elephants, but fluent in fear. They saw Pyrrhus' army, 25,000 men in gleaming phalanx, and beasts that shook the earth with every step. And they didn't just see a threat. They saw a future they hadn't prepared for. At Heraclea, in 280 BC, that future hit them like a wall of tusks. The battle was chaos. Screams, trumpets, dust. Pyrrhus' elephants smashed the Roman lines, scattering legionnaires like dry leaves. But something strange happened. Rome didn't collapse. They retreated, regrouped, recorded everything. Because Rome didn't believe in defeat. It believed in learning. Have you ever faced an enemy who grew stronger every time you hit him? That's what Pyrrhus discovered. After Heraclea, after Asculum, after the blood-soaked victories, Rome just kept coming. And every time, smarter, faster, colder. The phrase Pyrrhic victory was born not from arrogance, but agony. Pyrrhus once said, after defeating the Romans, "If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined." Picture it. Thousands dead, allies wavering, supplies thinning. Pyrrhus, the gleaming king, watching Rome bleed and not break. Where are the Greeks' poets now? Where were the gods of Olympus? All Pyrrhus had was silence. He tried diplomacy, tried bribes. Rome refused both. They didn't want peace. They wanted revenge. And yet, deep inside the Senate, voices whispered. They weren't just studying Pyrrhus' tactics. They were admiring them. One Roman commander, Gaius Fabricius, met Pyrrhus face to face, refused his gold, smiled in the presence of his war elephants. "You may scare children with these beasts," he said, "but not Romans." Honor met strategy. Pride met adaptability. And something shifted in Pyrrhus. The glint in his eyes dimmed. His campaign unraveled. Rome didn't need to kill him on the battlefield. It killed him with resilience. He left Italy defeated in spirit, though not in name. Returned to Greece. Fought again. Died ignobly, struck by a roof tile thrown by an old woman during a city skirmish. Yes, a roof tile. The man who almost brought Rome to its knees. Undone not by steel, but by fate. But his ghost lingered, not as a cautionary tale, as a blueprint, because Rome, in fighting Pyrrhus, saw a mirror. They learned the danger of underestimating brilliance, and then they stole it. They adapted their legions, reorganized their cavalry, researched elephant warfare, even rewrote parts of their command structure, all from the ashes of this campaign. Pain had taught them more than victory ever could. So let me ask you, did Pyrrhus truly lose? Or did he birth the very machine that would soon grind his homeland into dust? Rome wasn't just collecting victories, it was collecting minds. And as it sharpened its sword, it began looking not just for enemies, but for cracks. Cracks in the pride of a divided people. Cracks in Greece itself. Because while Pyrrhus was retreating with broken dreams, Roman envoys were arriving with gifts, smiles, and maps. But they weren't offering peace. They were offering something far more dangerous. Friendship. They didn't come with legions. They came with scrolls, treaties, promises, open hands, hiding the dagger. Rome had learned that swords win battles. But words? Words win civilizations. After Pyrrhus, the Republic changed its weapon of choice. No longer was the gladius its sharpest tool. It was diplomacy, but not the kind written in ink. The kind whispered over wine. The kind sharpened with guilt, greed, and illusion. Greece by then was exhausted. Dozens of city-states, each proud, each convinced they were the heirs of glory, were locked in a tragic ballet of self-interest. Athens argued. Sparta isolated. Thebes smoldered in memory. Corinth flaunted wealth. Achaea dreamed of unity but lacked the spine to enforce it. Together, they could have resisted. But together was a word they only used in poetry. Rome noticed, and it smiled. Let's meet a man, Publius Sulpicius Galba, not a general, a diplomat. He visited the Greek cities not with threats, but flattery. He praised their culture, admired their statues, quoted their poets. Then, in the soft light of admiration, he whispered fear. Sparta eyes your trade routes. Aetolia prepares for war. Macedon cannot be trusted. And the city-states, drunk on their own reflection, believed him. Because Rome didn't need to lie. It only needed to remind them of their own insecurities. Why does a divided house fall? Because every locked door looks like betrayal. In 198 BC, the Aetolian League made a choice. Side with Rome against Macedon. They believed it was a temporary alliance. Rome knew better. Every alliance Rome offered came with invisible ink. And between the lines, dependency. By the time Macedon fell, so had the idea of a sovereign Greece. But no one noticed. Not yet. They were too busy celebrating victories that weren't theirs. And Rome? Rome watched from the shadows, adding names to lists, preparing the next whisper. It was psychological warfare wrapped in friendship. When the Achaean League asked for Roman help in settling internal disputes, it was over. Because once you invite Rome in, it doesn't leave. The cities became suspicious of each other. Old rivalries reignited. Troop movements misunderstood. All under Rome's watchful eye. You ever play chess with someone who rearranges the board while you sleep? That's what Rome was doing. One alliance at a time. One betrayal at a time. And soon, Greeks weren't fighting the Romans. They were fighting each other on Rome's behalf. What do you think? Did Rome win more with words than with swords? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let's pause. What does it say about a people, philosophers, warriors, artists, that they fell not to violence, but to suggestion? Rome never needed to invade Athens. It made Athens ask for help. And by the time Greek leaders realized what was happening, they were trapped in a web they had helped weave. But one man would arrive, wrapped in laurel, shining in virtue, to deliver a promise so seductive, so beautifully spoken, that the Greeks would forget they were already conquered. He stood on a platform, raised a hand. "You are free," he said, and the crowd erupted. But they didn't see the chains. Not yet. His name? Flamininus. And he didn't come to conquer cities. He came to conquer minds. The sun bathed the fields of Isthmia in gold. It was 196 BC, and thousands of Greeks gathered for the games, unaware that history was about to change not with a battle, but with a speech. Titus Quinctius Flamininus stepped forward. Roman general, young, charismatic, fluent in Greek, his armor polished, his words sharper than any sword. He didn't raise a banner. He raised an idea. "You are free." 3 words, 3 syllables. And with them, he shattered centuries of Macedonian dominance. Or so it seemed. The Greeks erupted in cheers. Hats thrown, tears spilled, statues promised. The crowd surged toward him, not in fear, but reverence. They called him Soter, Savior. But if they had listened closely, they might have heard the silence behind his smile. What did Flamininus really give them? Freedom? Or obedience? You see, Flamininus understood something most commanders didn't. If you want a people's loyalty, don't conquer their homes. Conquer their hope. Greece had been starved of pride, chained by Macedon, divided by its own ego. And here was Rome, offering not war, but validation. Flamininus didn't say submit. He said stand. And in that moment, the Greeks didn't feel subjugated. They felt seen. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. He removed garrisons, let cities keep their festivals. He even quoted Homer in speeches. It all looked like friendship, but it smelled like dependency. In Sparta, a young soldier named Nicandros watched Roman ships dock in their harbors. He was confused. Did we win something? He asked his commander. No, the man replied. We just stopped losing. Rome had planted its flag without planting a single spear. But not everyone was fooled. The philosopher Polybius, exiled to Rome years later, would write of Flamininus. He freed us like a leash released from the neck, not removed from the hand. That's the genius. Flamininus gave the Greeks just enough power to feel in control, but not enough to act on it. And behind every embassy, a Roman officer stood. Behind every new law, a Roman precedent lurked. The people cheered freedom, but what they received was expectation. And when some city-states resisted that expectation, they didn't face speeches. They faced siege, because Rome's liberator had come not to liberate, but to reframe what chains looked like. And once Greece believed the chain was their choice, Rome never needed to pull it again. Let me ask you something. What's more dangerous, an enemy who takes your land, or a friend who rewrites your identity? Flamininus returned to Rome as a hero. The Senate applauded, but behind their celebration, They saw something far more valuable than territory. They saw a blueprint. Greece had bowed without realizing, which meant others could too, but not everyone had been tamed. Far to the east, another force stirred, one that still believed in walls. In terrain, in Thermopylae, but when the sacred pass echoed once more with marching feet, the defenders didn't hold. They fled. Rome would return to Thermopylae, but this time, not as admirers. This time as conquerors, and what they'd shatter wasn't just a myth. It was the very soul of resistance. The narrow pass of Thermopylae, a place where the earth once drank Spartan blood with pride, where 300 men made time stop with courage. But not this time. 191 BC. The banners are different now. No Leonidas, no last stand. Instead, Rome stands at the gates, not as students of Greek heroism, but as its executioners. Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire, the so-called King of Kings, had allied with Aetolian Greeks to hold this sacred ground. He believed, perhaps foolishly, that history would repeat. That terrain alone could turn the tide. But Thermopylae doesn't reward nostalgia. It punishes illusion. Imagine the Roman soldiers that day, staring at the same cliffs where legends were born. But they weren't reverent. They were relentless. They didn't come to honor the myth. They came to bury it. Antiochus had 10,000 men. The Romans had more, but that wasn't what mattered. They had something sharper than swords. Momentum. And momentum turns symbols into shadows. The battle began with the same narrow defiance the Greeks were known for. Spears clashed. Shields held. The Aetolians roared with ancestral fire. But Rome adapted. They flanked. They climbed the cliffs like wolves circling a dying stag. And when they descended, death came from above. Panic. It wasn't the terrain that failed. It was the mindset. Because unlike Leonidas' men, these defenders didn't die where they stood. They broke ranks. They ran. A place once synonymous with sacrifice became a symbol of surrender. What do you think? Did Rome win more with words than with swords? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. You could almost hear the ghosts screaming from the stones. Antiochus fled to Chalcis, a king retreating from memory. And Rome? Rome didn't just win. It erased. They didn't merely take Thermopylae. They reclaimed it, rewrote it, turned a Greek victory from centuries ago into a Roman footnote. One Roman commander, Manius Acilius Glabrio, stood on the battlefield afterward and declared, "Let this be remembered, not for their bravery, but for our patience." Patience. That was Rome's secret weapon. While the Greeks clung to legend, Rome mastered psychology. They didn't worship the past. They weaponized the present. How does a civilization die? Not in fire, in forgetfulness. The moment the Spartans fled, something deeper collapsed. Not just a line of defense, but the illusion that Greek pride could still protect them. And Rome? Rome walked through that breach, not just with steel, but with silence. A silence that said, "We are not impressed. We are inevitable." But the Greeks weren't finished yet, because even in the ashes there are embers. And one city, proud, defiant, suicidal, would soon rise to make one final stand. Its name? Corinth. And when its walls fell, it wouldn't just be a siege. It would be a symphony of vengeance and a warning carved in blood. That philosophy does not stop empire. Observe, orient, decide, act. The ODA loop, a modern concept coined centuries later by fighter pilot John Boyd. But its spirit? Rome had already mastered it. While Greek generals debated tradition, Rome evolved. While Greek city-states clung to glory, Rome calculated angles, measured terrain, studied failure like scripture. It wasn't just about battles. It was about how they learned, and how fast. The Greeks fought like dancers, elegant, deliberate, rhythm-bound. Rome fought like engineers with rage in their veins. If the phalanx was a poem, the legion was a machine. Let's break it down. Greek warfare was static. Lines, discipline, honor. But the Roman legion could bend, split, regroup, strike from angles unseen. Picture it. Two armies clash. The Greek phalanx surges, a wall of spears, majestic, unstoppable, until it meets an enemy that doesn't push back, but splits, encircles, leads it from the sides. The legions were modules, each century of 80 men like a muscle fiber, contracting, relaxing, adapting. Greeks saw chaos. Rome saw opportunity. That was their genius. Every defeat was data. Every enemy, a textbook. After facing Pyrrhus, they redesigned their elephant tactics. After Thermopylae, they rewrote their mountain warfare. After each Greek betrayal, they refined their diplomacy. And through it all, they moved faster. Not just on the battlefield, but in mindset. Meanwhile, Greek city-states were still arguing over whose ancestors had fought at Marathon. Speed versus elegance. Fluidity versus form. Rome didn't just win because it was strong. It won because it was adaptive. Let's talk about logistics. Rome built roads, straight, solid, eternal. The Greeks built memory. One Roman general famously said, "Amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics." And in that one sentence, you see the future cracking open. Because while Greek armies waited for inspiration, Roman armies moved. While Athens debated, Rome supplied. While Sparta hesitated, Rome maneuvered. And that is the war few historians talk about. The war of pace. Ever try to play chess against someone who's always 3 moves ahead because they already played this game yesterday? That was Rome. And the Greeks? They were brilliant, but brilliance trapped in amber. In the age of legacies, Rome built systems. In the age of speeches, Rome issued orders. In the age of heroes, Rome trusted process. What's the lesson? Pride is beautiful, but process wins wars. Still, the Greeks weren't fools. They felt the cold steel tightening around their autonomy. And one city would choose fire over chains, not because they thought they could win, but because they refused to kneel. That city was Corinth. And Rome? Rome was ready. 146 BC. Corinth's gates locked. Roman banners on the horizon. Inside, pride, art, defiance. Outside, a storm of iron. And when it fell, it wouldn't just be the end of the city. It would be the moment a civilization turned to ash. The wind was dry that morning, but what carried through the air wasn't dust. It was finality. 146 BC. Corinth, jewel of the Peloponnese, gatekeeper to the Aegean, stood defiant, encircled by Rome's wrath. But this wasn't just a city under siege. It was a civilization on trial. The Achaean League had refused another Roman demand. Enough was enough, they said. Greece would kneel no longer. But here's the truth no one told them. The moment you're forced to declare your dignity, you've already begun to lose it. Inside the walls, panic and poetry. Philosophers preparing arguments. Blacksmiths forging desperate blades. Mothers carving names into amulets, so their children wouldn't vanish nameless. Outside the walls, Lucius Mummius, Roman consul, hardened, methodical. He didn't hate Corinth. He didn't need to. Hate is inefficient. What he needed was a message. Rome didn't just want surrender. It wanted spectacle. The siege began with volleys of artillery, not to breach walls, but to weaken belief. A Roman tactic. Fire first where the spirit lives. Then came the assault. Roman legions advanced in silence. No chants, no horns, only boots on dirt. Corinthians thought they'd hold. They remembered Thermopylae. They remembered Marathon. But memories don't block Pila. The walls cracked, then the hearts. And when the gates broke open, history shattered with them. Mummius gave his men one day to strip the soul from stone. Statues, masterpieces smashed for sport. Temples turned to bonfires. Theaters bled actors and ash. Even art couldn't beg for mercy. Elder men, once tutors of philosophy, were executed in public squares. Women were chained. Children were marched out under a red sun. And the city? The city was erased. Brick by brick, scroll by scroll. Rome didn't just win. It purged. But ask yourself, why destroy beauty? Why bury ideas? Because the deepest fear of empire is not rebellion. It's remembrance. Rome feared not that Greece might rise again with armies, but that it might rise again in thought. Would you have resisted Rome or adapted like they did? Share your answer in the comments. So it burned not just buildings, but meaning. And yet, even as smoke painted the sky black, a Roman soldier paused in a looted villa. He held a scroll, written in Greek. He couldn't read it, but he didn't let go. Something lingered in that ash. Rome had won, but something ancient had slipped past its sword. Because what Rome didn't know, as it marched back triumphant, dragging statues and slaves, was that it hadn't killed Greece. It had invited it in, and soon, the conqueror would be speaking in the tongue of the conquered. The legions returned home, victorious. Corinth was gone. Greece had fallen, or so they thought. But conquest is a strange thing. You may silence a people's voice, but still hum their tune. Because even as Roman generals paraded Greek slaves through the streets of Rome, those same generals were quoting Homer. In their villas, they debated Socrates. In their courts, they admired Plato. They didn't just conquer the Greek world, they adopted it. And just like that, the defeated began to teach the victors. It started quietly. Greek tutors hired to educate Roman sons. Greek statues placed in Roman atriums. Greek phrases spoken by Roman senators to sound refined. What is this? Admiration or infection? The philosopher Horace once wrote, Greece, though captured, made her savage conqueror captive. Let that sink in. The very culture Rome tried to erase was now shaping its soul. Julius Caesar? He worshipped Alexander the Great. Cicero built his rhetoric on Greek philosophy. Even emperors in their marble halls surrounded themselves with Greek scholars, plays, and ideas. And the Roman gods? They blurred. Jupiter became Zeus, Mars, Ares, Venus, Aphrodite. Different names, same mythology. Rome didn't realize it, but it had become the student. You ever see a parasite so beautiful, so ancient, that you mistake it for wisdom? That was Greece. It didn't fight back with swords. It seeped in, through poetry, through architecture, through education. And like a reverse Trojan horse, it wasn't the Greeks who sent the gift. It was Rome who carried it in. Imagine this. A Roman senator at dawn, rehearsing a speech. He stands tall, wears a toga, but in his heart, he's channeling Aristotle. Rome had taken the body, but Greece possessed the mind. That's the paradox. The sword won the war, but the scroll won the future. Can you really conquer a civilization? If you end up becoming it, let's not forget, the Roman Empire would one day collapse. But Greek philosophy? Still taught. Greek architecture? Still built. Greek drama? Still performed. In the end, who truly triumphed? The army that burned cities? Or the idea that rebuilt the world? Because while Roman banners faded into dust, one question whispered through the ruins of time. Did Rome conquer Greece? Or did Greece, in dying, conquer Rome? And in that final breath, what remained? Two civilizations. One, ancient, poetic, fractured, proud. The other, young, pragmatic, ruthless, focused. Greece and Rome. When they collided, the world didn't just change. It shifted. The conquest of Greece wasn't a single moment. It wasn't decided at Heraclea, Thermopylae, or even Corinth. It was a slow unraveling, not of armies, but of identity. Rome didn't win by sheer force. It won by adaptation. It didn't just beat its enemies. It studied them. Every Greek mistake became a Roman strategy. Every Greek brilliance a Roman blueprint. And so Greece fell, not for lack of valor, but for excess of memory. They clung to what had been. Rome built what would be. Let's remember, Greece gave us ideals. Rome gave us systems. Greece dreamt. Rome executed. But here lies the final twist. Behind every Roman triumph stood a Greek whisper. Behind Caesar's tactics, Alexander's shadow. Behind Roman rhetoric, Athenian breath. Behind every road laid, every law written, a philosopher once asked why. So what do we call this? Victory? Or transfusion? Perhaps Greece didn't fall at all. Perhaps it evolved through the veins of its conqueror. And Rome? Rome rose, not alone, but on borrowed shoulders. Its greatest strength? Knowing when to kill and when to learn. And now, centuries later, when we study courage, we speak of Sparta. When we debate ethics, we quote Aristotle. When we design buildings, we echo columns from Athens. Rome conquered, Greece endured. So ask yourself, who truly wins? The empire that silences, or the voice that survives? And when you hear that voice again, in laws, in language, in legacy, know this: it was born in fire, tempered in defeat, and it still breathes. But if the story of Greece was written in philosophy, the story of Rome was written in power, and the battle that sealed that power was fought not in a city of scholars, but in the shadow of a Macedonian line. It was brutal. It was decisive. It was the day the phalanx met its reckoning. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this series, the clash that defined the future, Pydna, the Battle of Pydna.